Hi everyone, so a few people have asked me to go through an example of what an extract question might look like, and so I'm going to take you through one of the possible extracts that could come up in 2025 as it hasn't been used by Eduqas yet. So as a really quick reminder, we are looking at question 21 for Macbeth, the extract question. In general, the question will ask you, how do you think an audience might respond in this part of the play? And you've got 15 marks. You're aiming to spend 20 minutes on it. We've only had twice since the beginning of this specification when the question hasn't been an audience question. So it is very important that you focus on it. Some of the key scenes that I think might come up: Act 1, Scene 1, not Scene 2, sorry. The dagger scene. We've got Act 2, Scene 3, when Duncan's body is discovered. Banquo's suspicion at the beginning of the scene where Macbeth talks to the assassin, so Act 3, Scene 1, and then Act 4, Scene 1 with the apparitions. You can see all of the ones that have come up and all the previous questions. It's really good for you to know what has come up and what the kind of the sorts of extracts that Eduqas use are. So just to remind you about your methodology for this question, you are making sure you know what the question topic is, highlighting that. Place the extract in the story of the play, and that's going to be your first couple of sentences for your answer, where you talk about what is happening at this point in the story and how that is relevant to some of the wider narrative. Then you go through the extract in chronological order, identifying 6 to 8 quotes from the beginning, the middle and the end, and you talk about how those quotes might impact an audience. You need to analyse a couple of them, and they can be from anywhere in the extract that you choose, the ones that work best for you for thinking about the imagery that Shakespeare uses or the language that he uses or some of the patterns that he uses. You don't need to analyse all of them. So what does it mean when we're looking at the audience question? And I'm not going to talk through all of these, but in terms of how audiences respond most by thinking. Don't jump straight to feelings like, oh, the audience feels shocked. Yes, there will be moments in the play where there is a genuine sense of shock from the audience, but mostly we're thinking through ideas. And so we do that because a character is presented in a different way, or they're developed, or something changes. We see that through dramatic irony. We're thinking through the connotations of some of the language that Shakespeare uses. We're impacted by the pace and everything moving, the entrances and exits. There's that idea of tension and suspense. We are identifying the themes and the morals of the play, the message that Shakespeare wants us to do. If your teachers have been talking to you about things like power and guilt and ambition, those are some of the things that the audience also will be thinking about. The use of stagecraft, particularly through the use of stage directions. All right, so the extract that I've chosen is one that hasn't come up yet for Eduqas. It is the beginning of the dagger scene. It's where Banquo and Fleance are talking. It's night, it's very dark outside. They bump into Macbeth. They give Macbeth a diamond, which is a gift from the king to Lady Macbeth, and then they leave, and Macbeth begins his soliloquy. The reason why I think that Eduqas are more likely to choose this section of that scene rather than just the long soliloquy where he's talking to the dagger, which they can choose, that's totally up to them, is that Eduqas like to choose scenes where there is some kind of character development, where there is dialogue between characters. They are unlikely to choose 30 odd lines that are one character solidly talking. So as you'll see as we go through this extract, we do have the very beginning of the dagger speech at the end of this, but we deal with the issues of Banquo and Fleance and all of that stuff as well, which is more interesting. So we're starting at the beginning. You're trying to choose about 6 quotes. So you're going to pick 2 from the beginning, 2 from the middle, 2 from the end. And my first quote is, "There's husbandry in heaven. Their candles are all out." And this quote I'm not analysing because the temptation would be to just tell the examiner what it means. So we're going to point out here that both Banquo and then Fleance earlier, you can see it says the moon is down, comment on the unnatural darkness. So that shows your understanding that it isn't just that it's a dark night, that there's not very much, that maybe it's very cloudy, but it's unnaturally. It's metaphorical as well as literal. The audiences recognise that Shakespeare is building this sense of impending doom, which you would get if you were in one of those traditionally candlelit theatres from Shakespeare's time. It's highlighting that the moral conflict that we have this night as Macbeth begins to feel like he shouldn't do it and then does go ahead and do it is not just confined to the human realm. It is actually part of the nature of Scotland, and that will create this sense of foreboding. So that's our first quote. Our second quote comes just a little bit further down. So we have Banquo talking to Fleance, and he says, "Restrain me in my cursed thoughts that nature give way to repose." And he's talking about the fact that he hasn't been able to go to sleep, repose, because he's suffering from these cursed thoughts. And we have this idea of moral anxiety, this temptation. We recognize, we interpret that these cursed thoughts are of the witches and their prophecies, and we sympathize with this idea that he is attempting to resist evil. And it stands, Banquo, in contrast to Macbeth. Again, you've probably heard about the idea that Banquo can be seen as Macbeth's foil, his direct opposite. This is one of those moments that where you could talk about that. All right, our third quote then is directly after Macbeth enters with a torch. It's very dark. Banquo says, "Give me my sword." Who's there? He doesn't know who's coming towards him. And we have this sudden shift in tension. Banquo arms himself. There is this instinctive nature of fear and danger in Macbeth's castle. We have this theme of appearance and reality here when Macbeth responds with a friend, because Banquo is questioning what can and can't be seen, what can and can't be trusted, who's there, give me my sword. Macbeth presents himself as being safe here, and we see the irony of his deception and the fact that he is the one that arrives with the light, with the torch. And again, Shakespeare playing with that kind of narrative of appearance versus reality. So then we move on into this discussion, and again I'm picking out, "I dreamt last night of the 3 weird sisters. To you they have showed some truth." And this is Banquo's line. And again we get the development of Banquo's character, particularly again his contrast or foil of Macbeth. So we see his honesty, his growing suspicion of Macbeth. He's happy to acknowledge the witches as they have no power over him. Macbeth relies in the next line, "I think not of them." So he is that idea that Shakespeare develops both Macbeth and Banquo's character here. We yet again see Banquo as being morally superior. We see Macbeth as being duplicitous. We get the beginning of Macbeth's fear of Banquo's reactions and his suspicion, which feeds later into Macbeth's paranoia and his desire to get rid of Banquo. All right, then we've got our last 2 quotes, and we're going down towards the end of this section, and these are the ones that we're going to think about analysing in detail, which is where we would want to pick out particular language or maybe some techniques or some imagery that Shakespeare's used. So Macbeth says to Banquo, "If you shall cleave to my consents, when 'tis, it shall make honour for you." And essentially what Macbeth here is doing is testing Banquo's loyalty. He's being deliberately ambiguous. He's using euphemism, but the word cleave, which means to cut or to slice, suggests something violent. So he's saying, if you slice in with me, if you cut in with me, I will reward you later on. And it's almost like he's saying something beneficial for you is going to happen in the future. We get this veiled reference to the murder. We get the veiled reference to it being good for Banquo if he sides with Macbeth in this treasonous scheme. And so Shakespeare is really building in the ideas of loyalty, deception, treason, honour, lies, guilt into this one statement. And then, of course, we have the exit of Banquo and Fleance, and we have the beginning of the dagger speech. And I would just analyse in detail that first couple of lines. Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle towards my hand? You could talk about this as the beginning of the soliloquy, signals Macbeth's moral breakdown. It opens with this series of rhetorical questions. It shows his uncertainty, his moral confusion. We know that the dagger symbolises this idea of violence towards a king that he's previously protected. We know that Macbeth's violent nature is part of the reason that why he's admired, but he interprets the handle towards my hand as supernatural intervention supporting his choice to commit regicide. So for the audience, this is a moment whether we consider Macbeth's actions to be as a result of the fate that the witches have implied or of his own free will. All right, just finally, it really does help if you subscribe or follow me on TikTok. I want to know whether you would like me to go over some of the other extracts that haven't come up yet, whether this video was useful. So leave a comment if you would like that. Otherwise, I'm going to move on very rapidly to covering things for component 2 because we are a handful of days away from component 1. So wishing you all the best and thank you for your support if you have watched this video.